Dr. Robert McClain never thought that at 74 years old, he would feel like a medical student again. The same cold sweat on his palms, the same racing heartbeat, the same fear of the unknown. Only now, he wasn't sitting in a lecture hall. He was sitting in his colleague's office, staring at his own X-ray. Dark spots on his lungs told a story without words, a story he had read hundreds of times to other patients. Now this story had become his own. "How much time?" Robert asked, his voice sounding calmer than he felt. Dr. Harris lowered his gaze to the papers. 40 years of friendship didn't make this conversation any easier. Maybe 6 months. Best case scenario, a year. Robert nodded. He had always known this day would come. He just hadn't expected it now. Not this summer. Not when life had finally begun to feel simple and quiet. An hour later, he sat in his car by the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks below with the same rhythm as 40 years ago, when he first came to this small coastal town, when he thought all the time in the world belonged to him. Now, time had become the most precious currency, and he intended to spend it wisely. Robert started the car and drove home, to his small house overlooking the sea, to his old horse Champion, to the silence that no longer seemed lonely. Over the past few months, this silence had filled with new sounds. Children's laughter beyond the fence, quiet conversations between 5-year-old Zoe and his horse. Her father, David, had moved to the neighboring house 3 months ago, a young widower with a daughter trying to start a new life. Robert parked in the driveway and saw the familiar scene. Zoe stood by the fence with a carrot in her hand. Champion carefully took treats from her small palms. The girl spoke to the horse in a quiet voice. What did a 5-year-old tell an old horse? "Hi, Uncle Robbie," Zoe called out, noticing him. "Hi, Princess," he replied, getting out of the car. Uncle Robbie. That's what she'd called him since the first day they met. Though they weren't related, though they'd only known each other for a few months. But sometimes the most important relationships are born the fastest. Zoe ran to the fence. Her long auburn hair gleamed in the evening sunlight. Large green eyes looked at him with that trust that only children possess. Trust that made his heart both lighter and heavier. "Champion is sad today," she said in a serious tone. "How do you know?" "His eyes are sad, like Daddy's when he thinks about Mommy." Robert looked at his horse. Champion did indeed look tired. 22 years was a respectable age for a horse. Lately, he had been eating less, standing more in the stable's shade, as if waiting for something. Or someone. "Maybe he's just tired from the heat," Robert said. Zoe shook her head. "No, he's sad. Horses feel things before people do." The greatest wisdom often comes from the mouths of children. Robert knew this from professional experience. Children saw truth where adults saw only symptoms. "Daddy says he's going on a business trip tomorrow," Zoe continued. "For 3 days. I'll be with Mama Jen." Mama Jen, that's what Zoe called the nanny. A sweet, middle-aged woman who took care of the girl when David worked. But Robert saw how Zoe looked at her, with gratitude but without real closeness. "Will you miss Daddy?" he asked. "A little. But Champion will be with me. Right, Champion?" The horse snorted and reached his muzzle toward her hand, as if confirming the promise. Robert watched this scene and felt something unusual, something like envy, not of the child, not of the horse, of their connection, of the simplicity with which they understood each other. When had he last felt such closeness with someone? Martin, his son, called once a month, Polite conversation about work, weather, health. No real closeness, no real understanding. 30 years ago, after Ellen's death, they had somehow drifted apart. Each had closed himself in his own grief. Now it was too late to change anything. Or was it? "Uncle Robbie, have you ever been scared?" Zoe suddenly asked. The question caught him off guard. "Just scared, like I'm scared of thunderstorms. Or darkness." Robert crouched by the fence at her level. "You know what, Princess? I'm scared right now." "Really? Of what?" How do you explain the fear of death to a 5-year-old child? Fear of pain? Fear of leaving someone alone? "I'm afraid of not having time to do important things," he said finally. Zoe nodded seriously. "Like spending time with people I love. Like taking care of Champion. Like making sure you'll be happy." "Why do you think you won't have time?" The directness of a child could sometimes be merciless and healing at the same time. "Because time sometimes goes faster than we think," he replied. Zoe reached her small hand through the fence and touched his large palm. "Then you should do important things right now." Robert squeezed her hand. So small, so warm, so trusting. "You're right, Princess." The sun began to set beyond the horizon. The sky turned shades of pink and gold. Zoe waved and ran to her house. Robert remained by the fence with Champion. "What do you think about all this, old friend?" he asked the horse. Champion looked at him with dark, wise eyes. There was something like understanding in them, or forgiveness. Robert went to the stable and brought fresh hay. Champion ate slowly, carefully. Every movement seemed deliberate, like a person who knows the value of every minute. That evening, Robert sat on the terrace with a cup of tea. The sea rustled below. Stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. He thought about time, about what remained, about how to use it. Tomorrow, David would go on a business trip. Zoe would stay with the nanny. But what if something unexpected happened? What if she needed someone nearby? Robert made a decision. He would offer David to leave Zoe with him. Not forever, just for these 3 days. As a good neighbor, as someone who had time and desire to care for her. As a person who finally understood the most important things in life often come unexpectedly. In the form of a 5-year-old girl with trusting eyes. In the form of an old horse who understands more than words. In the form of a last summer that might become the most beautiful. The next morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made everything seem possible. Robert woke earlier than usual, his mind already racing with plans. He had made his decision the night before. Today, he would offer to help David with Zoe. He found David loading his car in the driveway next door. The young man looked tired, the way single fathers often do. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and endless worries. "Morning, David," Robert called over the fence. "Oh, hi, Robert. Early day for you too?" "I wanted to catch you before you left. I heard about your business trip." David paused, a suitcase halfway into the trunk. "Yeah, 3 days in San Francisco. I hate leaving Zoe, but this client meeting could change everything. For my consulting business?" Robert had learned bits and pieces about David's story over the months. A software consultant trying to build his own firm, a widower doing his best to balance work and fatherhood. A man who moved to this small coastal town hoping for a fresh start. "I have a proposition," Robert said. "Let Zoe stay with me while you're gone." David's eyebrows rose. "That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. She spends half her time here anyway, talking to Champion." The truth was more complex, but Robert kept it simple. He didn't mention his diagnosis. He didn't mention the sudden urgency he felt to matter to someone. He didn't mention how Zoe's laughter had become the brightest part of his days. "Mrs. Patterson is already arranged," David said, referring to the nanny. "I don't want to impose on your retirement." "David, I'm 74 years old. I've got more time than I know what to do with, and Zoe loves that horse more than anything." That wasn't entirely true either. Robert's days were carefully structured around doctor's appointments and quiet contemplation. But something about Zoe's presence made everything feel more alive. David considered this. "She does talk about Champion constantly, and about you." "What does she say?" "That you listen to her. Really listen. Not the way adults usually listen to kids." Robert felt a warmth spread through his chest. When had anyone last said he was good at listening? "Look," Robert continued, "she'll be right next door. Mrs. Patterson can check on us if you're worried. But I think Zoe would be happier here, with space to run around, with Champion." David glanced toward the house where Zoe was probably just waking up. "Let me talk to her, see what she thinks." 20 minutes later, Zoe bounded out of the house in her favorite purple pajamas. Her hair stuck up in every direction, but her green eyes were bright with excitement. "Daddy says I can stay with Uncle Robbie and Champion," she announced. "Only if you want to, sweetheart," David said carefully. Zoe ran to the fence where Champion stood waiting. She had an uncanny ability to appear exactly when she was needed, or wanted. "What do you think, Champion? Should I stay here while Daddy's gone?" The horse lowered his great head and gently nuzzled her shoulder. Zoe giggled, taking this as obvious approval. "It's settled then," she declared with the confidence only children possess. David looked between his daughter and Robert. "Are you absolutely sure about this? She can be quite a handful." "I raised a son," Robert said. "I think I can manage one small girl." What he didn't say was how much he needed this, how the quiet house had begun to feel like a tomb, how Zoe's chatter and Champion's gentle presence were the only things that made him forget about dark spots on X-rays. An hour later, David's car pulled out of the driveway. Zoe waved from Robert's front porch until the vehicle disappeared around the bend. Then she turned to Robert with the serious expression she wore when contemplating important matters. "So what do we do first?" she asked. Robert realized he hadn't thought this through entirely. What did one do with a 5-year-old for 3 days? His own son was grown before he learned how to really play. "What would you like to do? Can we give Champion a bath? He's getting all dusty." Robert looked at his horse, who did indeed look like he could use grooming. "I suppose we could do that." They spent the next hour preparing. Robert found the old grooming supplies in the stable, brushes and combs he hadn't used in months. Zoe appointed herself chief assistant, organizing everything with military precision. Champion stood patiently as they worked. Robert showed Zoe how to brush in long, smooth strokes, how to clean around the sensitive areas of his face, how to speak in calming tones. "He likes it when you sing," Zoe observed. "I'm not much of a singer." "That's okay. Champion doesn't care if you're good. He just likes the sound." So Robert found himself humming old songs while they worked. Songs from his youth, half-remembered melodies that surprised him by surfacing. Zoe joined in with wordless tunes of her own invention. Champion's coat began to gleam under their attention. His ears pricked forward alertly. For the first time in weeks, he seemed fully present and engaged. "He looks younger," Zoe said, stepping back to admire their work. She was right. The careful grooming had revealed the strong lines of Champion's build, the intelligence in his dark eyes, the dignity that age couldn't diminish. "Sometimes we all need a little extra care," Robert said. They were putting away the grooming tools when Robert's phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number, which was odd. He had only left 2 hours ago. "Hello?" "Robert, thank God you answered." David's voice was tight with strain. "I've been in an accident." Robert's chest tightened. "Are you hurt?" "Banged up pretty good. I'm at the hospital in San Luis Obispo. The car flipped when I swerved to avoid a deer." "Jesus, David, how bad?" "Broken ribs, possible concussion. They want to keep me for observation. Maybe surgery tomorrow if the internal bleeding doesn't stop on its own." Robert sat down heavily on a hay bale. Zoe looked up from where she was feeding Champion apple slices, sensing the shift in mood. "What do you need me to do?" Robert asked. "Can you keep Zoe? I know this wasn't the plan, but I don't have anyone else. My mother lives in Florida, and she's not in good health herself." "Of course. Don't even think about it. Zoe's fine here." "I don't know how long." "David, stop. Focus on getting better. Zoe is safe and happy. That's one less thing for you to worry about." There was silence on the other end. Then David's voice, thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. Just heal. Everything else can wait." After hanging up, Robert looked at Zoe. She had stopped feeding Champion and was watching him with those perceptive green eyes. "Daddy's hurt, isn't he?" she said quietly. Robert considered lying, protecting her from the worry, but something in her expression told him she deserved the truth. "Yes, sweetheart. He was in a car accident, but he's going to be okay." "Is he in the hospital?" "Yes. The doctors are taking very good care of him." Zoe nodded slowly, processing this information. "Can we visit him?" "It's pretty far away, but we can call him later and make sure he knows you're thinking about him." She seemed to accept this. Children were often more resilient than adults expected. Or maybe they simply trusted that the grown-ups would handle the complicated things. "So I get to stay here longer?" she asked. "Looks that way. Is that okay with you?" Instead of answering, Zoe walked over and wrapped her small arms around Robert's waist. The gesture was so unexpected, so trusting, that he felt his throat tighten. "Thank you for taking care of me, Uncle Robbie." Robert rested his hand on her head, feeling the silk of her hair. "Thank you for letting me." As evening approached, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Champion grazed peacefully in the paddock nearby. The ocean murmured its eternal song below the cliffs. Robert realized that in the space of one day, his careful solitude had been completely transformed. Now he was responsible for this small person with her boundless trust and endless questions. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just when his own time was running short, life had handed him someone else's future to guard. But maybe that was exactly what he needed. Maybe caring for Zoe would give his remaining months the purpose they had been lacking. Maybe this unexpected turn was not a burden, but a gift. A gift that came with green eyes and the wisdom to know that horses understand more than words. 3 days had passed since David's accident, and Robert was learning that caring for a 5-year-old was both easier and harder than he remembered. Easier because Zoe was remarkably self-sufficient and endlessly fascinated by simple things. Harder because her questions came without warning and demanded honest answers. "Uncle Robbie, why do people get old?" she asked over breakfast. Robert paused with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "What makes you ask that?" "Champion moves slower than yesterday, and you make little sounds when you stand up." Children noticed everything. Robert had hoped his increasing stiffness wasn't obvious, but Zoe missed nothing. "Bodies wear out over time," he said carefully. "Like cars or toys that get used a lot. But why can't they get fixed?" "Sometimes they can. Sometimes they can't." Zoe considered this while methodically eating her cereal. "Is that why you're sad sometimes? Because your body is wearing out?" The directness of her question took Robert's breath away. He had thought he was hiding his condition well. Apparently, not well enough. "What makes you think I'm sad?" "Your eyes get fought away, like you're seeing something that makes you hurt inside." Robert set down his coffee cup. This child saw too much, understood too much. It was both a gift and a burden. "Yes, sweetheart, sometimes I am sad, but being with you makes me happy." It was the truth, if not the whole truth. Zoe's presence had indeed brought light to his darkening world, but beneath the joy lay an ever-present awareness of time running out. "Good," Zoe said with satisfaction, "because Champion and I like having you not sad." After breakfast, they went to check on Champion. Robert had been worried about the horse for weeks, but this morning his concern deepened. Champion stood in the corner of his stall, head lowered, barely acknowledging their arrival. "He's really sick, isn't he?" Zoe said quietly. Robert examined Champion more closely. The horse's breathing was labored. His usually bright eyes were dull. When Robert checked his pulse, it was irregular and weak. "I think we need to call the veterinarian," Robert said. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived within an hour. Robert had known her for 15 years, since she first started practicing in the area. She was thorough, gentle, and honest to a fault. Zoe insisted on staying while Dr. Chen examined Champion. She stood quietly in the corner, her small hands clasped together, watching every movement. After 20 minutes, Dr. Chen straightened up and looked at Robert. Her expression told him everything he needed to know. "Can we talk privately?" Dr. Chen asked. "Anything you tell me you can say in front of Zoe," Robert replied. "She understands more than most adults." Dr. Chen glanced at the little girl, then nodded. "Champion's heart is failing. Has been for some time, I'd guess. At his age, this isn't unexpected." "How long?" Robert asked, the familiar question that had become too important in his life. "Days, maybe a week if we're lucky." Zoe stepped forward. "Will he hurt?" Dr. Chen knelt to Zoe's level. "Not if we take good care of him. I can give him medicine to make breathing easier, but his body is very tired." "Like Uncle Robbie's?" Zoe asked. The words hung in the air like a revelation. Dr. Chen looked sharply at Robert, who felt his face flush. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Robert asked carefully. "You both breathe the same way sometimes, all wheezy and careful. And you both get that look." "What look?" "Like you're listening to something inside that the rest of us can't hear." Dr. Chen's professional gaze fixed on Robert. "Robert, when did you last have a full physical?" "Recently," he said evasively. Zoe walked over to Champion and gently stroked his neck. The horse lowered his great head until it rested against her small shoulder. "It's okay, Champion," she whispered. "Being scared is normal. Uncle Robbie taught me that." Robert watched this tender scene and felt something break open in his chest. This child, this impossible wise child, was comforting a dying horse with words about fear, words he had shared with her just days ago. "Zoe," he said softly, "how did you know Champion and I are alike?" She looked up at him with those green eyes that saw too much. "Because you take care of each other the same way," very gentle, like you both know something sad is coming. Dr. Chen stood slowly. Robert, I think we need to have that private conversation. No, Robert said firmly. No more private conversations. Zoe deserves to know what's happening. He knelt beside Zoe and Champion, his old knees protesting. Sweetheart, sometimes people get sick the same way animals do. Sometimes their bodies get too tired to keep working properly. Are you sick like Champion? Zoe asked. The question he had been dreading, the truth he had been hiding. But looking into her trusting face, Robert found he couldn't lie anymore. Yes, he said simply, I am. Zoe nodded as if this confirmed something she had already known. Are you going to die? Dr. Chen inhaled sharply, but Robert held up a hand. This conversation belonged to him and Zoe alone. Probably sooner than I'd like, Robert said. But not today, and not tomorrow. What about Champion? Robert looked at his old friend, whose breathing had become even more labored in the past few minutes. Champion might not have as much time as I do. Zoe was quiet for a long moment, her hand still stroking Champion's neck. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. Then we need to make sure he knows he's loved, every single day until he doesn't hurt anymore. The simplicity of her words, the mature acceptance in her voice, undid something in Robert's carefully constructed emotional walls. Tears he had been holding back for months suddenly threatened to overwhelm him. You're right. That's exactly what we need to do. Dr. Chen left them with medication for Champion and a promise to return the next day. As her truck disappeared down the driveway, Robert and Zoe sat in the stable with the horse. Uncle Robbie? Zoe said after a while. Yes, Princess? When Champion goes to where horses go after they die, will he still remember us? Robert considered the question seriously. I believe he will. I think love is the one thing that doesn't get worn out or broken. Good, because I want him to remember that we sang to him and that we weren't scared to love him, even though loving hurts sometimes. The wisdom in her words took Robert's breath away. This child understood something that had taken him 74 years to learn, that love was worth the pain of loss, that caring for others gave meaning to the time we had. Zoe, you are the smartest person I know, he said. Daddy says the same thing, but I think grown-ups just forget how to see things simply. They spent the rest of the day with Champion. Zoe sang lullabies while Robert brushed the horse's coat. They told him stories about the ocean and the seagulls. They shared memories of sunny mornings and carrot treats. Champion seemed to rally slightly in the evening. His breathing eased. His eyes brightened when they spoke to him, as if their love was indeed a kind of medicine. That night, Robert tucked Zoe into the guest room bed. She had insisted on keeping the window open so she could hear Champion if he needed them. Uncle Robbie, she said as he turned off the light. Yes? I'm glad Daddy got hurt. Robert turned back, startled. Why would you say that? Because if he didn't get hurt, I wouldn't be here to help Champion not be alone. And you wouldn't have someone to help you not be alone either. In the darkness, Robert smiled despite the tears on his cheeks. You're absolutely right, Princess. Sometimes the scariest things lead to the most important things. That's what love does, Zoe said sleepily. It makes scary things into important things. As Robert walked to his own room, he realized that this 5-year-old had just taught him the most valuable lesson of his life. Love didn't eliminate fear or pain or loss. It transformed them into something sacred, something worth experiencing fully, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. The next morning arrived gray and quiet, with fog rolling in from the ocean like a soft blanket. Robert woke to find Zoe already dressed and sitting by the window, watching Champion in the paddock below. "He's standing up," she reported without turning around. "That's good, right?" Robert joined her at the window. Champion did indeed look better than yesterday. His head was raised, ears alert to the sounds of morning. The medication Dr. Chen had provided seemed to be helping. "It's very good," Robert agreed. "Sometimes rest and love work better than we expect." They made breakfast together, falling into an easy routine they had developed over the past few days. Zoe set the table while Robert cooked eggs. She chattered about her dreams, about the seagulls she could see from her window, about whether Champion dreamed of running in green fields. "Do you think he misses being young?" she asked, spreading jam on her toast with careful concentration. "I think he's grateful for the life he's had," Robert said. "Young horses run fast, but old horses know where they're going." "Is that why you're not scared anymore?" Robert paused in his coffee preparation. "What makes you think I'm not scared?" "Yesterday you were all tight and worried. Today, you're soft around the edges." Soft around the edges. Robert had never heard himself described that way. But Zoe was right. Something had shifted yesterday when he stopped hiding the truth. The constant tension of secrecy had melted away. After breakfast, they called David at the hospital. His voice was stronger, though still tired. The surgery had gone well, and doctors expected him to be released within a few days. "How's my little girl?" David asked. "I'm good, Daddy. Uncle Robbie and I are taking care of Champion because he's sick like Uncle Robbie." There was silence on the other end. Robert took the phone gently. "David, we can talk about this when you get home," he said quietly. "Are you?" David's voice was careful. "Yes, but not immediately. We'll have time to figure things out." "Jesus, Robert, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. These days with Zoe have been a gift, the best I could have asked for." After they hung up, Zoe looked at Robert with her serious expression. "Daddy's worried about what happens to me if you die too." The bluntness of 5-year-old logic never failed to surprise him. "Probably. I told him not to worry because you're teaching me important things before you go." "What kind of important things?" "How to love something even when it hurts. How to be brave when you're scared. How to take care of someone who needs you." Robert felt his throat tighten. Those are very important things to know. They spent the morning with Champion, who seemed to enjoy their quiet presence. Zoe read him a picture book about horses, while Robert cleaned his stall. The simple tasks felt meditative, purposeful. "Uncle Robbie," Zoe said, looking up from her book, "when you were little, did you know you wanted to be a doctor?" "I wanted to help people feel better. I didn't know exactly how." "Did you help lots of people?" Robert considered this. Had he helped people? He had diagnosed diseases, prescribed treatments, performed procedures. But had he truly helped? "I tried to fix their bodies," he said slowly, "but I think I forgot to pay attention to their hearts." "What do you mean?" "I spent so much time looking at test results and x-rays that I stopped really seeing the people. Like you see Champion, like you see me." Zoe nodded sagely. "Daddy says doctors have to be careful not to forget that sick people are still people." "Your daddy is very wise." "He learned that from Mommy. She said the most important medicine is knowing someone cares about you." Robert stopped what he was doing. "Tell me about your mommy." Zoe's face lit up. "She had hair like mine, but curlier. And she made cookies that looked like animals. And she always knew when I was sad, even if I didn't say anything. She sounds wonderful. She was, but she got sick in her brain, and the doctors couldn't fix it. Daddy says some things can't be fixed, only loved. The wisdom in this child's understanding of loss amazed Robert. At 5 years old, she had processed grief and emerged with insights that many adults never reached. Is that why you're not scared of Champion dying? Because you know about loving things that can't be fixed? Maybe, and because Champion taught me something important. What's that? When something is dying, it needs extra love, not less love because you're scared of being sad. Robert sat down on a hay bale, overwhelmed by the truth in her words. Zoe, where did you learn to be so wise? From you and Champion and Daddy, and from Mommy, even though she's gone. Love keeps teaching you things even after people die. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Champion dozed in the afternoon sun, his breathing steady and peaceful. The medication was clearly helping, but Robert could see the deeper weariness in the horse's eyes. Champion was resting, gathering strength for whatever came next. Uncle Robbie, Zoe said as they prepared to go inside for lunch, are you glad you met me? Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in years, Robert said honestly. Even though I came because of sad things, Daddy's accident, and your sickness, and Champion being old, especially because of those things. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the hardest places. Zoe considered this. Like flowers in cracks in the sidewalk. Exactly like that. That afternoon, Dr. Chen returned to check on Champion. She was pleased with his improvement, but realistic about the future. He's comfortable now, she told them. That's what matters. You've given him exactly what he needed. How long do you think? Robert asked. Maybe a week. His body is fighting, but peacefully. When he's ready, he'll let you know. After Dr. Chen left, Robert and Zoe sat on the porch watching the ocean. The fog had lifted, revealing a brilliant blue sky dotted with white clouds. Uncle Robbie, what happens after people die? I don't know for certain, but I think the love we shared stays somehow. In the people we loved, in the things we taught them, in the way we changed their lives. So you'll still be with me even after you die. In all the important ways, yes. Zoe leaned against his shoulder. Good, because I have lots more questions, and you give the best answers. Robert wrapped his arm around her small frame. I'll answer as many as I can while I'm here. And after that, you'll have to trust that you know more than you think you do. That evening, as Robert tucked Zoe into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Thank you for not lying to me about scary things, she said. Thank you for not being afraid to hear the truth. Uncle Robbie, will you stay close tonight? In case Champion needs us? Of course, Princess. We'll take care of him together. As Robert settled into the chair by her window, he realized something profound had happened over these few days. He had stopped being afraid of dying. Not because death had become less real, but because living had become more meaningful. In caring for Champion and Zoe, he had found the purpose his remaining time needed. In accepting their care in return, he had learned that love was indeed the medicine that mattered most. The fog was rolling in again, wrapping the house in gentle quietude. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, there was peace. David came home on a Thursday morning, when the coastal fog hung low and the world felt hushed and sacred. Robert heard the taxi in the driveway and watched through the window as his neighbor emerged carefully. moving like a man rediscovering his body after trauma. Zoe had been watering Champion's feed bucket when she heard the car door slam. She dropped the bucket and ran toward the fence, then stopped suddenly, remembering David's injuries. "Daddy," she called, but stayed where she was, waiting for him to come to her. David's face transformed when he saw his daughter. The worry lines that had etched themselves deeper over 6 days of separation smoothed away. He walked slowly to the fence, and Zoe reached through the slats to hug him as gently as a 5-year-old could manage. "I missed you so much, little bird," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I missed you too, but Uncle Robbie took really good care of me, and I helped take care of Champion." Robert approached from the house, giving father and daughter their moment while staying close enough to join the conversation. David looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude and something else. Understanding, perhaps. The knowledge that they shared something now, the experience of facing mortality. "Robert, I don't have words," David began. "Then don't use any," Robert replied. "You'd have done the same for me." "The nurses told me Zoe called every day. She was so calm, so grown up. What did you two talk about?" Zoe looked up at her father with those wise green eyes. "Important things. About being brave when you're scared. About how love stays even after people die." David's gaze shifted to Robert, a question forming in his expression. Robert nodded slightly, confirming what Zoe's words implied. "Can we sit somewhere and talk?" David asked quietly. They moved to Robert's porch, where 3 chairs had somehow appeared over the past week, as if the space had naturally expanded to accommodate their unlikely family. Champion grazed peacefully in the paddock, his breathing still labored, but steady. "How long have you known?" David asked when they were settled. 2 weeks before you left for your trip. 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky." "Christ, Robert. And you took on responsibility for Zoe anyway?" "David, taking care of Zoe wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. She taught me more about living in 6 days than I learned in 74 years. Zoe had been listening quietly, swinging her legs from the adult-sized chair. "Daddy, Uncle Robbie isn't scared anymore because he knows his love will stay with us even after his body gets too tired." The simplicity with which she stated this profound truth left both men momentarily speechless. "And Champion?" David asked gently. "Champion is teaching us about dying peacefully," Zoe said. "Dr. Chen says maybe a few more days, but he's not sad because he knows we love him." As if summoned by his name, Champion raised his head and looked directly at them. For a moment, Robert could swear the horse was trying to tell them something. That afternoon, while David rested and recovered from his journey, Robert and Zoe spent time with Champion. The horse seemed different, not worse exactly, but more distant, as if he was already beginning to travel toward whatever came next. "He's getting ready," Zoe observed. "How can you tell?" "His eyes look far away, like yours do sometimes. Like he's seeing something beautiful that we can't see yet." They groomed gently, singing the soft songs that had become their ritual. The horse stood patiently, occasionally nuzzling Zoe's shoulder or breathing deeply when Robert brushed a particularly soothing spot. "Uncle Robbie," Zoe said as they worked, "when Champion dies, will you be sad?" "Yes, I'll be very sad. But I'll also be grateful for the time we had with him." "Good." Sadness means the love was real. Again, this child's wisdom took Robert's breath away. "Where do you learn these things, Zoe?" "From watching, from listening, from you and Champion and Daddy. Love teaches you things if you pay attention." As evening approached, Champion lay down in his stall. something he rarely did anymore. Robert and Zoe sat nearby, just being present. David joined them, moving carefully, but determined to be part of this vigil. "Thank you," David said quietly to Robert, "for teaching her that love doesn't end when life does." "She taught me that," Robert replied. "I just finally learned how to listen." Champion died that night, peacefully, with his head in Zoe's lap while she sang a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. Robert held one of his great hooves. David sat nearby, witnessing this gentle passage with quiet tears. "He's not breathing anymore," Zoe said softly, her hand still stroking Champion's neck. "No, sweetheart, he's not. But he looks peaceful, like he's having a good dream." Robert marveled at her composure, her intuitive understanding of this moment's sacred nature. There was sadness in her eyes, but no fear, no denial. "Can we stay with him for a little while?" she asked. "Of course." They sat in the stable until dawn, taking turns sharing memories of Champion. Zoe told stories about the games they played and the secrets she whispered in his ear. David spoke about watching his daughter discover the healing power of caring for another living being. Robert shared memories that went back 22 years to when Champion was young and full of fire. As the sun rose, painting the stable in soft gold light, Zoe stood up and kissed Champion's forehead. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for teaching me about loving brave." Loving brave. Robert filed that phrase away in his heart, knowing he would carry it with him through all. In the days that followed, they held a small ceremony for Champion in the meadow where he had spent his happiest hours. Dr. Chen came, along with a few neighbors who had known the horse over the years. Zoe insisted on speaking, sharing her favorite memories, and explaining how Champion had taught her that love makes everything sacred, even sad things. David pulled Robert aside afterward. "I've been thinking about what comes next, for all of us. You don't need to worry about me, David. I'll be fine." "That's not what I mean. I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure to say yes." Robert waited. "Would you consider being part of Zoe's life? Officially, I mean, not just as a neighbor, but as, I don't know what to call it, honorary grandfather? Family?" Robert felt his throat tighten. "David, I'm not going to be around much longer." "That's exactly why I'm asking. Zoe loves you. You've taught her things I never could, and you—" David paused, searching for words. "You found something to live for. I can see it in how you are with her. What about when I get sicker? When I can't take care of myself? Then we'll take care of you. The way you took care of her. The way she took care of Champion." Robert looked out at the meadow where Champion had run free, where Zoe now played among the wildflowers, her laughter carried on the ocean breeze. "I'd be honored," he said finally. 3 months later, Robert sat on his porch watching Zoe teach David how to brush the new horse they had rescued together. A gentle mare named Hope who had been neglected but not broken. His own health had declined, but slowly, giving him time to savor each day. Zoe still came over every afternoon after school. They read books, tended the small garden they had planted, and talked about everything and nothing. She helped him organize his medical files and write letters to old friends. In return, he helped her with homework and listened to her endless questions about life and death and everything in between. "Uncle Robbie," she said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink, "are you happy with how your life turned out?" Robert considered the question seriously. A year ago, he would have focused on regrets, on opportunities missed and words unspoken. Now, sitting beside this remarkable child who had taught him that love transformed everything it touched, he felt only gratitude. Yes, Princess, especially the ending. Good, because I think Champion would be proud of how we're doing the important things he taught us. What things are those? Loving brave, taking care of each other, making every day sacred because we know how precious they are. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Robert understood that he had been wrong about so many things. Death wasn't the opposite of life. Fear was. Love wasn't something you protected out of fear. It was something you shared by opening up. And sometimes, the most beautiful endings came disguised as beginnings, in the form of a little girl with green eyes who knew that love was the only medicine that really mattered. The last summer had become exactly what it needed to be, a season of grace, taught by a child and an old horse, to a man who finally learned how to live.